Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hi there, welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast. This week I have an interview with Vortex, who some of you will know from Twitter as the one Vortex. But firstly, a word from my show sponsor this week. This is for crypto investors in the US. I want to introduce you to Equity Trust. They can educate you on the possibilities of protecting your profits, as it is possible to mitigate taxes by investing in cryptocurrency with your IRA. With a self-directed IRA, you can invest in Bitcoin and other crypto in a potentially tax-deferred or tax-free way. If this sounds interesting to you, you can discover more by visiting trustetc.com/crypto. They have a free guide which will explain the potential benefits and possibilities for you to invest in a tax-advantaged environment. Get your guide now at trustetc.com/crypto. So thank you to Equity Trust for sponsoring the show this week, as it enables me to focus on bringing more great guests on the show. So anyway, on to the interview this week. As I've been jumping down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, I thought it would be good to sit down and talk to a developer in the space to understand some of the challenges they face. And so it was really great to connect with Vortex and have him on the show, because he is somebody I've been following on Twitter for quite a while. And I really love the commentary he adds to what's going on in the world of Bitcoin. He is currently expanding his own content network, which is great. And he's also launched a workshop to teach C# developers how to begin integrating Bitcoin into their applications. So we get into a whole bunch of things, and I'm definitely out of my depth a few times, but Vortex does a really great job explaining things in simple terms to me. Sadly, we lost around 7 minutes in the middle of the interview due to sound issues, where we discussed the integrity around how Corey Fields had approached communicating vulnerabilities he had found in Bitcoin Cash, and we also lost a bit about the Bitcoin IPO. So sorry, that won't be there, but I will share some stuff about that in the show notes so you can read up further on it. Okay, please do support the show. Please do leave me a review on iTunes if you think it deserves 5 stars. That would be great. Please do follow me on social media. I'm at What Bitcoin Did on Twitter, on Medium, on Steemit, on pretty much anything. And please do check out my website. That is www.whatbitcoindid.com, and you can email me on hello@whatbitcoindid.com. And please do share this out with your friends and family. Okay, I will move on to the show now. I hope you enjoy it. If you do have any questions, feel free to email me. I pretty much get back to anyone. Okay, thanks. Hey, morning, Vortex. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, Peter? Really excited to be on this podcast. I think we got a lot of stuff to talk about, so I'm really excited to get to it.
Yeah, and thanks for coming on. As you know, with my podcast, I tend to ask some of the dumber questions because I'm not from a technical background, want to learn as much as I can. And I think, obviously, you're quite a technical person. You've got a history of software development. So I think it'd be good to explore some of these subjects, but I might ask some questions that might seem a bit silly. But just for those who don't know you, because you're actually my first, essentially a non-guest. But if you could let people know a little bit about your background, the things you do, and where your experience lies.
Sure. So really just I want to say one more time, really excited to be on the podcast, Peter. I'm a big fan. You interview a lot of people that are in the space that I care about and that I listen to and look up to. So I really just want to say one more time, thanks for having me on the podcast. But really my background is just mostly software development. So I really did start specifically web development, web application development. So I started way back, in the late 90s and starting with classic ASP, then went into a little bit of PHP. And finally, I found .NET, and that's where I found my favorite, my calling right there, my favorite software development language. From there is where I built my career in software development over the past 15 years. It's been bouncing around from smaller projects to larger projects, small companies, large companies. I've kind of run the gamut at this point. And then, of course, I found Bitcoin, and that has just led me to a whole other world.
And from my background, because I used to have a web agency, but I was the sales guy, and I had developers, and we had PHP and .NET. And from my understanding, PHP is obviously open source. .NET is Microsoft, right?
So .NET is Microsoft. However, .NET has been open sourced along with the C# language. Microsoft about 5 years ago or so open sourced it, and since then it's actually been growing really exponentially, as things tend to do when you open source them. Right, people can become anybody in the world can become passionate about it and put their all of their mind to it, all of their passion and their mind and their knowledge right to it. And so that's what we've seen with .NET. It's actually just getting, specifically C#, just getting a ton of commits from the community. People are really excited about it. And of course, now it's completely cross-platform. So that's another thing they did when they open sourced it, is now it works on, every platform, Mac, Windows, Linux. And so there's a lot of Linux C# developers out there nowadays. And so it's really exciting to see this platform grow. And year after year, it continues to be in the top 5 most loved and used languages across the world.
And interestingly, I think the reason the majority of our clients were on websites were built using PHP as opposed to .NET is that one client I remember we had on .NET, there were really high server costs to have the you'd have to probably explain it to me, but the installation of the software on the server or a license for the server, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was very expensive, and most clients who were having a small website built just could not afford the cost of .NET.
Yes, absolutely. So back in the day there in the early 2000s and stuff, Microsoft still had their kind of monopoly, their control on software, and really they were charging those prices. But really about 5 to 7 years ago, Microsoft got a new CEO, they got a new direction. They realized that you can't sort of monopolize software anymore, thanks to that beautiful thing that we all love and know called the internet. This has really leveled the playing field for people who want to bring software to bear on the world. And this is now the future, the current, both the future and the current world that we're living in. Anybody in the garage can put any large company out of business now, right? As we've seen. And so this is the ethos now. So Microsoft has made all of their tools free, all of their main tools free to start out with. You still have to do licensing for large amounts of users and things like that, but for the most part, it is just entirely free. They've open sourced and freed all of their main tools, all of their main stack, from ISS, the server processor, to Visual Studio, the actual development IDE that you write the code in, and at this point, most of everything is free and really welcoming to developers with the amount of documentation that they really provide these days.
And C#, so is that the language the Bitcoin software is written in?
No, and so let's clarify this a little bit too, because people get Jimmy Song's course and my course sort of a little bit mixed up. And so what I focus on is I am an application developer. So okay. I'm not a protocol developer, right? So protocol developers are, oh my gosh, very few and far between. This is a very specialized niche field that only a select number of people on the planet even pursue. And so this is another reason that keeps Bitcoin so amazing, so innovative, and so secure is some of these developers are working on Bitcoin. And so I am by no means going to be working on Bitcoin itself anytime soon as a protocol developer. However, what I am is an application developer, and so I write specifically web applications. That's what I've done throughout my career. And so now there is a library called NBitcoin, created open source library created by NBitcoin, created by a gentleman named Nicolas Doyer. Nicolas Doyer over there in Japan right now, and he created this open source library called NBitcoin that allowed any C# developer to be able to integrate Bitcoin into their applications. So now with this library, now we can start working with Bitcoin, not on Bitcoin, but with Bitcoin or over Bitcoin. So what I'm saying is we can start sending transactions, we can create wallets, we can integrate software with Bitcoin. So we can, for example, storefronts, and so we can start having stores accept Bitcoin, and even having the backend start verifying with Bitcoin. So, for example, you can use it as a verification system to verify that this document actually existed with a cryptographic hash, on the Bitcoin blockchain directly with this software. So we're the workshop is teaching developers, application developers, how to work with Bitcoin, and that's what I really like to do is work with Bitcoin. So that's the difference there between an application developer and a protocol developer.
Okay, but what language is the protocol itself written in? Sure.
So the protocol itself is written in C.
Okay, so what's the difference between C and C#? Just out of kind of interest, really.
Sure. So, and it's interesting because you see, the protocol itself is written in C, and that's great. We need it because C is a very low-level language, and that's great. We need the protocol, which is a very low level, to be written in these lower-level languages. But application developers, they need stuff to be a little bit easy because they need to do a lot more things. They need to be above that layer and be able to do a lot more exotic things a lot easier, and without having to worry about the bottom stack working, without having to worry about the protocol working or not. We're just assuming that it's always going to work. So we build our applications on top, similar to how the web works with the internet. We built the World Wide Web, over the top of the internet. Over the top of the HTTP protocol, we built JavaScript, and we built PHP, right, and we built ASP. All of these languages over the top of the protocol. So that's the big difference. So Bitcoin itself was written in C, the protocol, but then there's these libraries like NBitcoin that's written in C#, and then the application developers can use. And then there's implementations like Bitcoin Core that are written in different languages. There's Bitcoin J that's written in Java. There's Go. There's a Go implementation, and so there's all these different implementations, but the protocol itself is C.
Okay, and so your objective with this is to increase the number of people who program in C#, but also expose other C# developers to programming and interface with Bitcoin, to therefore spread Bitcoin out so it integrates with more live web applications.
Absolutely, and not just web applications, but because C# is not just for web applications. C# you can actually build regular, Windows and Linux applications as well. So it's really you hit the nail on the head. The main goal is to get more people working with Bitcoin, more developers aware of and working with Bitcoin.
Okay, and where do these workshops run?
So right now the workshop is sort of like Jimmy's workshop. We're trying to take it around the country and see if we can get feedback there and see if we can come to people's local backyard and really get them interested in Bitcoin. So right now the next 3 scheduled cities are for Las Vegas, San Francisco, and Seattle. But in addition to that, we're going to start doing an online course next month as well. So hopefully we'll be able to get people a lot easier that way. It'll make it a lot easier for them to join the course so they don't have to actually go anywhere. We'll just hopefully be able to do it over YouTube. And so that would be great too, because that's I think we can get a lot more developers that way as well.
And I assume that's these courses of people who have some kind of program experience. It wouldn't be for somebody like me who has no idea at all.
I'm sorry, Peter, but that's correct. This is specifically for C# developers. In fact, we do ask that you be an intermediate C# developer, which means between 1 and 2 years of C# development. But really, all of the ability to be a C# developer is completely available online. Like I say, all the education you ever need at this point is online. There's so many tutorials. There's so many videos that if you really want to take control of your own destiny, you can learn C# relatively easy from all this free tutorials, and then take the course, and then work with Bitcoin. And so it really is all up to the end person.
And you're obviously a very passionate Bitcoin person. I've been following you on Twitter for a while. I love your commentary on other people's posts as well. Why is it so important to you? What's the big deal for you with Bitcoin?
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's a couple of big angles to that, but essentially, I guess to put it most simply, I saw where the world was going. Right, people who were paying attention to economics, people who were paying attention to finance, we see where the world was going. We really were sort of going to this central totalitarian surveillance police state. That's where finance was headed with the central banking system that we currently have. And so there was really, I kind of saw no way out. There was really no other path until I found Bitcoin. And with Bitcoin, we really did invent digital scarcity. We really did steal fire from the gods. We really did have the ability to create our own money, the money for people, the people's money that we can control and not inflate and just completely print away. So this became very passionate for me in that way, because I saw a way out for humanity. I saw an ability to reboot our global financial system a better way. Maybe it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect, right? But we have to at least try to move away from the system that we currently have, the fiat system. And so that's what gets me up every day, is trying to educate people about Bitcoin, trying to tell them that, hey, guess what? We found a way. After thousands of years, we have found a way out of the central banking system. We have found a way out of the need to trust a third party. We found a way out of censorship. We found a way to actually have digital scarcity and permissionless innovation that nobody can stop across the planet. And this is the promise of Bitcoin, and this is what I try to share with my audience.
And is that why, I went through your Twitter and I thought it was quite funny. You only follow the Federal Reserve. I assume that's some kind of subtle trolling. But then I noticed you actually just have 2 lists. So you have your Bitcoin list, where I assume, which is basically most people's follow feed, and then you have your positivity list, which I thought was really cool. But is your Federal Reserve as your only follow? Is that some subtle trolling?
Yeah, so absolutely. What it really was, because I saw Snowden, right, and he's only following the CIA. And so
right.
what that was is it's not necessarily trolling. What it really is, in my opinion, is maybe it's some level of trolling. But what my personal opinion is, it's really bringing awareness to the fact of what the actual message is, right? He's bringing awareness to the fact that, look, he's keeping an eye on the CIA because he's trying to tell you guys that there's something wrong with the CIA. He's only following one person to try to bring attention to this, to try to raise awareness that there's something wrong here. And that's what I try to do with my account, is only following the Federal Reserve to show people that, like, look, this right here, this is what I'm fighting against. This right here is the problem. This is what we need to change. And I want to bring awareness to why we're all here in the first place. Because without Bitcoin, nobody would be here. And here we are. I got into Bitcoin because of people printing money, in the wrong way. And now look where we are with today, with ICOs and all this craziness. So somebody, in my opinion, had to bring attention back to the original reason why we're here, to create a sound money, to create something outside of the state, to create something outside of the current financial system, something new, something that everybody can use. And so that's a big part of that. And of course, I do have my other lists, right? Positivity. I am pretty spiritual, so I try to bring some of that education that I've come to really learn over many years of studying this kind of things. I try to bring that to people as well. And in addition to that, I've even recently started to trying to do like 1 hour DM AMAs where people can just ask me, anything they want for an hour, and hopefully I can help them in that way.
Oh, that's really great. And obviously it's worked because I saw it, right? And I'm now asking you the question. And now that question is going to go out on this podcast and my listeners are going to hear it. So I guess strategically it works. I don't know who my one follower would be. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. I also noticed you follow somebody who's become one of my most favorite people on Twitter. Is Beauty On?
Absolutely.
And I think he is a real... I assume it's a he, but I think he is a real hidden gem on Twitter. I don't agree with everything he says, but his tweets more than anyone else make me sit back and almost think, and I try and digest them. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever spoken to him. I'd love to have him on the podcast, but I just noticed you converse with him a bit.
So absolutely. So I have a whole bunch of stuff to say about that amazing gentleman.
He is pretty incredible.
He is absolutely incredible. I mean, he really is a scholar. He's like this person, and if you looked at his office, it would look just like you think it does. Just stacks and stacks and stacks of books of knowledge. Like this guy is well versed in history, politics, economics, finance. In my opinion, this is really a Renaissance man. In kind of every sense of the word, this man has understood where we are. So this man can definitely understand where we're going, and that's really, really cool because he does tweet out a lot of stuff. Like he really, really does, and it's hard to keep up. And because of that, we actually started working together recently. So
cool.
I just started a new YouTube channel called CryptoCast, and the CryptoCast Network. You can find that at cryptocast.network. And I'm trying to bring Beauty On himself on to create a podcast. And so he's agreed to come on. Well, maybe I shouldn't spoil it yet, but he's maybe on your show, Peter. For you, man, I'll let you know. I wasn't going to say anything yet, but for you, I'll let you know. Beauty On is trying to do a show on my network. I think we're going to call it Bitcoin Matters.
Okay.
And what he's going to do is he's going to take his tweet storms, his amazing tweet storms that can almost go on for what seems like forever, his amazing tweet storms, and he's going to try to create little audio bits, little bite-sized versions of that in a form of a podcast, and try to give some more color, try to give a little bit more description, maybe hold people's hand a little bit more to try to understand where we're going, because he does do some of these advanced techniques, some of these advanced topics, and some of these advanced ideas and concepts. He's going to try to bring it down a little bit to earth and in this audio format for everybody to be able to really understand and grasp. And I think we're going to try to start doing that within the next couple of weeks. That
would be great. I occasionally actually have the odd private DM with him, and put to him things that I'm confused, because I'm from a traditional background where we have left-wing politics, right-wing politics, centre politics. There's nothing outside the box, and I've just lived a very traditional life, right? I went to school, and then I got a job, and I earned money, and I went to the pub on the weekend, and I wasn't exposed to any libertarian politics. I wasn't exposed to any libertarian economics. I wasn't exposed to none of this. And I mean, it's all new, and it's a quite a seismic shift when you start thinking about new things. And I can't even remember why he and I started talking, but I occasionally put things to him and questions to him. I certainly test his patience, but at the same time, he's recommended a couple of books for me now. So I've got a couple of books which I'm reading because of him. But that's a great idea for a show. I think yeah. I mean, I would look forward to that, and yeah, really interesting. Okay, so let me ask you, and I know, and some people say it doesn't even exist as a term, but are you a maximalist? Because it seems like I would say you're like a 95% maximalist.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? People get this. Bitcoiners get this term posed to them all the time. They get this question asked all the time, like, "Are you an actual maximalist?" And just a quick history. This term was coined by Vitalik.
Oh yeah, of course.
By Vitalik Buterin of Ethereum, and he was coined by him because he saw these Bitcoiners with this extreme focus on sound money, and he's like, if you're not focused on this one thing, then if you're only focused on this one thing, then I guess you're a Bitcoin maximalist, and everybody else who's trying to do something different, we're not a maximalist. And so it kind of didn't. The term itself never really made a whole lot of sense to me, because really there's people that are focused on creating this new money, creating this sound money, creating this new financial system. And then there's people that are working on, other interesting experiments, maybe smart contracts or well, there's not a whole lot of other stuff interesting to me that's outside of Bitcoin right now. But, there's some things like that are interesting to other people, like smart contracts and things with Ethereum. And of course, ICOs, that was a big thing that that's Ethereum's big claim to fame, even though, of course, they were originally supposed to be a world computer. But now that seems to be their focus. And so for me personally, I try to champion innovation on my show. I try to encourage people to explore, to try to figure out new things, because we are all on this ride together. There's never going to be only one answer to any problem. However, what we can do is we can try to build something together. We can try to find a common language that we can then build things on top of. So that's sort of what we did with the internet. We decided to come together and say, you know what, TCP/IP or IP, that's the winner. TCP is the winner. The open source version is the winner. That's what people want. And now we can build an entire thing on top of it, and we built the World Wide Web on top of it. And so I think that's something sort of similar to the path that we're going to find with Bitcoin, where we're going to have all these other experiments, and that's great. But we're going to need a common language to all speak together to be able to exchange value, and especially exchange value in a permissionless, censorship-resistant way. And so in that way, I think that, especially with the Lightning Network now being private by default, completely encrypted by default, I think that once you just connect to the Lightning Network and connect to Bitcoin, once you do that, then you can do whatever you want. You can have other coins, you can have other derivatives, you can have other features and things like that, whatever you want to do. And so I think that I try to almost discourage that term, and I try to just encourage innovation, and I try to encourage experimentation, but I really try to encourage focus. Whatever you're going to do, make sure you put focus on it, because the people, for example, what we call Bitcoin maximalists, most of them are just focused on this single thing, which is sound money, on this single thing that we can try to end the central banking cartel that's been completely wreaking havoc on society and killing millions of people and stealing millions of dollars and billions of dollars of people's savings and all of this craziness. We try to build something, an alternative to that. And if you're trying to build an alternative to that, then that's great. That's what we're trying to do. But the people that are most focused on that, the most focused on this sound money, are what we call Bitcoin maximalists. These people that are focused on Bitcoin.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think that's the kind of conclusion that I've come to, because obviously I interviewed Pierre recently, and I tried to explain to him that I think if you come into the market when there's really only Bitcoin, it's very easy to stay on the Bitcoin journey and be a Bitcoin maximalist. It's very hard when you come late and your first time you log into Coinbase, there's 2 things or 3 things or 4 things, and then trying to get your head around why Bitcoin Cash exists and get your head around it. It just takes a bit of time. I think I'm kind of getting there, and I certainly wouldn't say would or ever would be a Bitcoin maximalist, because I think it's interesting to see other projects. But I do understand Bitcoin maximalism in terms of sound money. I totally get that. But so outside of Bitcoin, what other projects are you interested in?
So right now, there's just really not a whole lot of stuff outside of Bitcoin that actually piques my interest to the point to where I want to pay attention to newsletters, Twitter accounts, mailing lists, right? There's so much information coming from Bitcoin that if you really are into Bitcoin and really are focused on sound money, there's just so much coming out of there that you almost don't have time to pay attention to anything else. Bitcoin is my full-time job. I work pretty much for Bitcoin. I like to say that I work, for Bitcoin now instead of companies. And so when you do that, when you actually try to dig deep into this stuff, you can see that there's just a never-ending amount of innovation that comes out of this space, just never ending. And when you pay attention to all of, like I said, the different social mediums, the mailing lists, and the Twitter accounts, you can find that there's always somebody working on something interesting in Bitcoin. And again, with that end goal of a focus on sound money, not breaking that first layer, and with a focus of having a layered approach where we can have millions and millions and millions of transactions per second with Lightning on top of Bitcoin. So you see these projects that have with that in mind, with that idea in mind, execute and build these scalable actual applications. There was something real quick called Satoshi's Place. Satoshi's Place was this drawing application where you would pay 1 Satoshi over the Lightning Network per pixel. And it ended up actually scaling really, really well. There was just tens and tens of thousands of transactions. This thing was going viral, and it was insane. And we were wondering, like, is this going to break Bitcoin? This is the experiment, right? Because CryptoKitties broke Ethereum, and all the ICOs broke Ethereum. Would this break Bitcoin? Would Satoshi's place break Bitcoin? And sure enough, it did not break Bitcoin, not even close. Didn't have any effect on the network overall, at all entirely. And there was actually people were actually getting feedback and helping it fix any sort of issues that were happening in real time. So not only did this one site get more activity just as a test bed, more activity than all of the top 10 D apps in Ethereum. This thing actually scaled. It didn't slow down. It didn't break. It actually worked. And so this is the type of the stuff that I focus on a day-to-day basis. Applications with this type of things in mind, this layered approach, this scalability, this focus on sound money. You can find a whole lot of things. And maybe we'll talk about it later. But people like this Bitcoin Optech startup that was started, they're trying to tell people about this. They're trying to get the word out about it. And of course, with my show, I try to educate people as well on Bitcoin and all the new things that are happening in Bitcoin. And right now, most of the big things that are happening with Bitcoin are happening within Lightning. And so Lightning is what I'm really focused on right now, and all of the innovation that's going around in that.
Okay, so that's an interesting place to move to then, because Lightning itself can be a very difficult thing to understand or get your head around. And I've discussed it with a few people in detail with Samson and Jameson Lopp. And originally, one of the things I struggled with Lightning is that it felt like we were creating two layers for Bitcoin, and your ability to use each layer would be dependent on the affordability. Because the base layer could end up being quite expensive in the future if there are millions of transactions going through the Lightning network. Actually, closing out on the main chain could be quite expensive. So that's something I've kind of been exploring. But I also noticed a tweet from you when you talked about, I think you shared an image of a water droplet talking about the different layers in Bitcoin and the speed they move. And then I couldn't help but then comparing the layers of Bitcoin almost to like Inception. You've seen Inception, right?
Yes,
it
absolutely.
Almost felt like the different layers move at different speeds, but it's obviously all one connected network. So moving on to Lightning, what are the biggest myths around the Lightning network?
Sure. So one of the biggest ones is you kind of already touched on one already. You were like very, very expensive transactions, and of course that's not what we're seeing right now. Now that the network is further evolved, right? We're seeing things like companies batching their transactions. We're seeing techniques like that. We're seeing SegWit being in play over 40% of the network, so we're seeing much cheaper transactions that way. And we're also seeing the companies themselves scale, because remember during the last run up with these huge costly transactions, most of Bitcoin kept working, but most of these companies, these exchanges, they all went down. Coinbase went down. These things went right down. All of these centralized companies that were in the space went right down. They were not prepared for this type of traffic, this inflow that happened during the last big bull run in December. And so now, the ecosystem is much more aware, is much more ready. Like I said, we have SegWit, we're batching transactions, we have more things that are in the place that can create more privacy and more optimization. And so, Bitcoin is actually getting more and more optimized as the years go on. So yes, we had that bit of a influx of price transactions, but that wasn't really Bitcoin's fault. That was how the network was being used. Right, that was how the actual participants were using the network. And so, if we use the network more intelligently, if we continue to optimize the software, the blocks, then we can continue to keep the transactions prices relatively low on chain. And that's important, because that's a bit of a myth that I wanted to get across, is that people think that Bitcoin transactions are going to be expensive forever, or one day be like millions of dollars for a single transaction or something like that. And that's just not the case, because we are scaling Bitcoin. We are scaling both Bitcoin in every way in sense of the form, for transactions, for transaction speed, for transaction propagation, for syncing with the actual blockchain itself, and everything you can think of. We are scaling and optimizing. So I don't believe that we're going to have super expensive transactions on chain in the future. I do believe that they definitely will be more expensive than Lightning transactions, absolutely. Because see, transitioning to the Lightning. So with Lightning, I mean, the transactions are going to be really, really, really small. I mean, it's enforced almost, not really enforced, but encouraged, because everybody out, it's almost free to run a Lightning node, and so people are going to set their transactions low in order to compete with other Lightning nodes. And since it costs low already, then you're already competing with a very thin margin there. But there is an opportunity, as Lightning grows and grows exponentially, which it seems to have been doing so far, and we expect it to be, in my opinion, completely saturated throughout the entire ecosystem. by the end of next year, I think that it will continue to grow exponentially, and there might be an opportunity for people to actually make some money, some Bitcoin, or earn interest on their Bitcoin by putting it in the Lightning Network. So that's an interesting thing we can talk about later as well. But I think another myth is that I think one of the biggest myths is that Lightning is like an altcoin. The actual coin inside of Lightning is an altcoin, and so I'd like to disparage that myth a little bit because Lightning is definitely another layer, right? So but it's not an altcoin, and the big difference is that it is real Bitcoin, completely attached to Bitcoin in every way. It is real Bitcoin in the Lightning Network. And so a good analogy I like to do is if you sign a Bitcoin transaction, for example, if you take your Electrum wallet and you sign a transaction, but you don't broadcast it yet. That transaction right there, that's basically a Lightning transaction. So the Lightning Network itself is just a bunch of signed Bitcoin transactions that have not yet been broadcasted to the network, to the main chain. And so it's real Bitcoin. It's signed by real Bitcoin addresses that are really existing in the network. It's just that they haven't been broadcasted yet, and they don't broadcast until they're ready. And that's what we call settlement. And so we settle eventually to the main chain. And so that's what we're kind of seeing. We're seeing, this evolution of Bitcoin. We're seeing that Lightning is going to be the actual transaction layer where we're going to do most of the medium of exchange. And then Bitcoin, the base layer, will be more of a store of value where we settle back like a savings account. And so it's like checking in a savings almost. And I think that's where we're going to probably evolve next within the actual user interfaces. But if you look at some of the work that's been done by, for example, Jack Mallers on the Lightning Zap wallet, we can see that the integration is so seamless. It's so beautiful. Only differentiated by a color, something really simple, but it still very makes you understand that this is Bitcoin. You're sending Bitcoin now. It's just going to get there a lot faster and a lot cheaper. But again, there's some of these trade-offs, right? So you have to understand channels right now. Lightning channels. And that's another myth, is that the users are going to have to deal with channels. They're going to have to completely all have to open a channel, have an open channel. We're going to have channel problems with too much liquidity in a central place and things like that. But in reality, all of this is going to happen in the back end. And it's already starting to disappear off the UI. It still has to exist in the UI and the UX right now. These channels, users are going to have to be aware of them. But eventually they will completely disappear, and it'll just be seamless. You just send a transaction, just like Bitcoin. And so, and then I guess the final myth I'll go on is that these Lightning nodes are going to get centralized. Is that we're going to have another what do you call it? Federal Reserve like situation, right? Fractional reserve type situation with Bitcoin, fractional reserve. And of course, that's not even close to the case, because what we're seeing is on LiveNet. We're seeing, remember guys, this is a live experiment. Bitcoin is live, Lightning is live. You can see all of these statistics. And what we're seeing live right now on the network is that it is a completely decentralized situation. It is not a hub and spoke centralized situations. Anybody can hop on the network at any time and start funding liquidity. And then the channels will route, and we haven't even completely finished the routing capabilities of Lightning. It's actually going on something what we call autopilot right now, which does its best job to kind of get you from point A to point B, and does a good job. But when the actual finished part of the routing gets done, it will be completely seamless, and the channels can be completely disappeared from the background, and it really will be just seamless, instant Bitcoin transactions. And from the user's perspective, there'll almost be no difference at all.
And routing is it the biggest challenge right now facing the Lightning Network? It's it's where a lot of the focus is. I've read a bit about routing, that it's essentially new tech that needs to be developed. Help me understand that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting myth, I guess, as well, is that people think that Lightning or that routing isn't figured out for Lightning. It's completely figured out. It's just not finished coding yet. Okay. This is how early we are, guys. There's one more, that's kind of almost the final block for Lightning, is this routing part. And it's literally already written up, figured out, by the smartest people like Lalu from the Lightning Labs and other people. They've already finished this up. And so at this point, it just has to be coded up. And that's going to be happening within the next 6 months or so. And so what we're looking at is just, like I said, in my opinion, by the end of next year, just complete penetration of the ecosystem. You're going to have to get on Lightning. If you're not on Lightning, then you're not on the World Wide Web. You're just on the internet, which means you just have email. But of course, we know that with the web, we can have all sorts of things. We can have all these other different messengers, and we can have entire applications built in the browser, and all of this stuff built on top of the internet.
So we're still in beta for Lightning. When are we expected for it to be come out of beta and be fully rolled out? Is that what you mean by the end of next year?
So basically what we're looking at right now is Lightning is fully launched on LiveNet. It is in beta form, but it is in beta form on LiveNet. So that's kind of just so you know, for you and your viewers, it's an important distinction because it actually first started out on testnet, right? We have to test stuff first, and it was on testnet for a long time to make sure that all this stuff was working before we ever put it on mainnet. And then in fact, there were some people in the Lightning community that did not want it to go live as early as it did. But now we have the hashtag reckless in the Lightning community. But it has been a complete success so far. Again, only in beta, but they did launch on LiveNet, I think February, March of this year.
Okay, wow. And so when it starts to roll out, what would we expect to see? Will we expect to see consistent interfaces, a consistent experience? Will it? And how similar is it to a Bitcoin transaction?
Yeah, and again, there's some of this. There's some great videos out there that you can check from people that are working on wallets like Jack Mallers, and you can see that it's very, very, very simple. The UX and the UI looks exactly like Bitcoin. The only difference is that people try to differentiate with a color. Like, for example, blue or purple for Lightning, or yellow for Lightning, and then orange for Bitcoin. So that's really the only difference. And for example, in BTC Pay Server, an open source alternative to BitPay that allows anybody to be their own merchant processor, for that, it's a very simple drop down: Bitcoin or Bitcoin Lightning. And so, choose what you want to pay with. And so it's not consistent. The UI is absolutely really the opposite of consistent right now across the Lightning ecosystem. But that is something that I believe will be figured out over the next 6 to 12 months. And I said, but like I say, by 18 months from now, I mean, it'll be consistent, like you just say, consistent across the ecosystem. Everybody will be using it because it'll be used so much. If your wallet doesn't support it, it'll be not being on the World Wide Web.
And do you expect, therefore, across the majority of e-commerce websites, we'll start to see a rollout of, it used to be paid with debit or credit, and then it was paid with PayPal. Do you expect then a pay with Lightning to expand pretty quickly? Because it feels like you used to be able to play with Bitcoin a lot of places, and then places have reduced it and removed it because of the scaling issues. Do you expect, therefore, to see quite a rapid rollout of Lightning within e-commerce websites?
Yeah, so great question. So first, let me just say this. When I say by the end of next year, I mean within our own ecosystem, right? Okay. So I mean exchanges, I mean wallets, I mean everybody within the Bitcoin ecosystem, you got to be supporting this. Now, when you're talking about mainstream adoption, that's something different, right? But however, with Lightning, there is a whole lot of work, again, being done by many people like Jack Mallers on the Zap wallet for merchants specifically, to be able to sort of reinvigorate the merchant space again. Because as you say, sort of merchants a little bit went away, right, when the transaction fees got too high. They had an unfortunately a misrepresented expectation. There was people like Roger out there that was like, this is going to be free forever, no problem. On chain, we'll put every single bubblegum transaction and coffee transaction on the chain forever, and that'll be great. Mirrored across millions of computers for all of eternity. And it's like, no, we want to optimize something better than that. And so, now with Lightning, people are starting to build out merchant software. Again, just amazing, beautiful merchant interfaces that allows people to be able to just as easy as tapping, pay with Visa or Apple Pay, just as easy as that. Just tap, bam, scan, done. It's that simple. And there are videos out there that you can go look. I encourage you and your listeners to go out there and look at some of these demonstrations, some of these proof of concepts that are working right now on LiveNet that you can actually go look at and see people pay a coffee transaction, because some of these merchants are running some of this beta software. And you can see people paying with real Bitcoin over real Lightning LiveNet network, paying for their coffee with the wallet on their phone. And it's working right now. So I think there will be a big push. And I believe that after next year, towards into 2020, 2021 is where we're going to start seeing the big merchant adoption again, because Bitcoin will be in the news again from the price. So, between 2021 and 2022, we're going to see another big influx of merchant adoption. Absolutely. With Lightning.
And Lightning pretty much kills off the use case, I think, for Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash. I mean, Bitcoin Cash the team will have their arguments about the vulnerabilities of Lightning Network, which will over time be hopefully prove to be FUD, but it's going to kill off the use case for many other cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, and that's interesting because a lot of these cryptocurrencies, they're not taking the most important part of a medium of exchange into account, which is the store of value. You cannot physically have, economically, physically, in reality have a medium of exchange unless the item is a store of value first. You can say it's backed by everything like that, but if you can't take it to somebody to get eggs, then take that money hold it for a while, for a little bit, maybe to pay for eggs a week later. If that doesn't work, then you don't have a real money. So there's all this talk in the BCH sphere about how medium of exchange transfers, that's value. That's what makes it a store of value, medium of exchange. And it's like, nah, if that was true, then I could just take some seashells, transfer it to you, and then now we've got, now you believe that it has a store of value. No. That is not how it works. It has to be the item of exchange has to be, the money that you're using to exchange value has to have a store of value. That's what you're doing. You're exchanging value and human capital. And now with Bitcoin, we have the ability to store human capital. Like Trace Mayer likes to say, there's only two things that are scarce in this universe, and that is time and Bitcoin. And so now we have the ability to store time in our Bitcoin. We have the ability to store human capital in a real store of value that can be used across time and not deflated. So that's a really, really important value. But, BCH, it's really interesting. The community that they're trying to build, it's really crazy because you ask me, how is BCH going to happen in the future? Well, which one? They've already just recently split. BCH has fired their recent developer Datalinks and now hired a new team that was just announced today called Bitcoin SV. Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision. They're forking the ABC, the Bitcoin ABC implementation that was previously used for Bitcoin Cash, maintained by Datalinks, into this new implementation that is maintained by a developer, I forget his name now, some developer at nChain, who is all over Twitter this morning talking about how they've got hundreds of developers that they're going to build stuff with, but it's all in secret, not open source, so we can't see the code. So we just got to take their word for it. Just got to take their word for it, guys. BCH is going to be okay. We got to take their word for it.
Yeah. So this is Craig Wright's involved in this, right? I've seen him.
Absolutely,
tweet it
it's
out.
nChain. Yep, nChain is Craig Wright's company.
So it's just another nonsense, pointless Bitcoin, which no one's going to care about.
It's another implementation that nobody's going to care about. And they've already started the rhetoric. The thought leaders in BCH have already started saying, like, Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin SV. BCH is Bitcoin SV. ABC is altcoin. And it's like, what? ABC is the altcoin. BCH is the real Bitcoin. And it's you get so lost. And if you look at some of these about pages on some of these guys' BCH websites that are trying to explain Bitcoin Cash, the about page or the history, it's just like 4 or 5 pages of all of this ridiculous drama, craziness. You think a regular person is going to ever read any of that? No, they're not going to understand any of that. They're not supposed to understand any of that. All this is supposed to be in the background. The only people that are supposed to understand this stuff is the technical people, the developers, and the CEOs and the investors that are building these companies. I mean, because let me tell you something right now, Peter. In the future, when Bitcoin is everywhere, we're not going to be talking so much about it. It'd be like talking about the dollar. It's just going to be not interesting. But right now, it's interesting because this is new. This is a brand new world-changing technology, and so we're going to talk about it. BCH is just not talked about, not used, and now they apparently have another developer and another implementation that they think might win.
Well, that could be their own civil war then, which would be fine.
Really, some of the big things happening in Bitcoin is around privacy, because at this point we've sort of solved the scaling issue in Bitcoin. We have Lightning. People are working on Lightning. It's very, very promising. The technology is working. It's working. All we need to do now is finish that last mile, and so scaling is essentially solved. It's no longer interesting to some of the smartest developers in the world. So they're working on the next big. The next big opportunity in Bitcoin, the next big problem in Bitcoin, and that is privacy. And so we're trying to, there's many people out there that are working on various different implementations of cryptography that allow for just a whole bunch more privacy. And one of those implementations is a hidden wallet. Hidden Wallet is a wallet that's trying to do something called a Chaumian CoinJoin and on the network, which this means is that it uses other people's transactions to be able to obfuscate where the transactions came from. And so when you do this huge CoinJoin transaction and combine your transaction with all these other people, the actual people that are trying to scan the chain for analysis can't tell where the transaction came from or even what the balance was originally. And so it really does obfuscate a lot and create a lot of privacy. So these Chaumian CoinJoins was the first one was actually done on LiveNet just a couple weeks ago by the developer Nopera73, and you can Google this, check out the open source software project. It's great, and of course written in C#. But check that out. And the first live mainnet CoinJoin transaction was done, and it was successful. It was only around 7 people, but the software is designed to be able to scale to hundreds and then thousands and then tens of thousands and then millions of people, eventually creating this really great option for people if they want privacy on Bitcoin to be able to have. So that's a big thing. That's one of the big things. And then another thing,
would that be optional privacy?
Yeah, so that's essentially optional. You do have to opt into that right now. But the idea would be for it to be so robust and successful that people would want to, that software developers would want to build that into their wallets by default. And that would be the great end goal. I mean, it's a slow process, of course, but we have to have it working and ready. But over time, the idea is to make privacy by default in Bitcoin.
So interestingly, I think privacy is obviously good for the user in Bitcoin, but will possibly be very bad for the price. In that, I can't see Coinbase. Well, Coinbase are going to have some KYC AML issues if Bitcoin is a private coin. So interestingly, I think it's kind of. Do you see what I mean? It's good for Bitcoin, but bad for the price. Well,
that's the thing, and see, and that's not entirely true at all. Because remember, it's optional. It's optional. So Coinbase could, for example, to choose not to accept transactions that appear to be CoinJoined.
Yes.
They sort of already don't, right? They already don't accept transactions that are coming from certain things like gambling sites. They're already doing their blacklisting thing. And, I think that the open free market will win out against that. I think somebody will come along with something better that will allow these transactions, that will have more liquidity and will have more users and will have more activity and eventually will be more successful. So, it's just a competition, but it's just so early right now in the Bitcoin game, let alone the Bitcoin privacy game, to be able to tell how that's going to play out. But in my opinion, it doesn't affect the price at all because the market demands this. The market wants this. I guarantee you that privacy, is one of the number one killer apps for Bitcoin. Censorship resistance, the ability to route around these crazy controls that we've had in place for hundreds of years. This permissionless innovation is, I believe, going to win out over these centralized KYC solutions like Coinbase. Because remember, Coinbase looks a lot like a bank. It looks a lot like what we already have. And that's always true with new world-changing technologies. We build on this new amazing opportunity, this new amazing technology. What do? We build an emulation of the old. We do it every time, right? With roads, with electricity, and now with money. We're doing this with banks. And so I think that over time, these better solutions with more privacy will win out.
Okay, interesting. So do you think that then will end up killing off the use case for Zcash and Zcoin and Monero? Do you think those coins will end up having no use case?
Well, it's interesting because Lightning is already, privacy by default, so that already sort of kills their main use case. Now,
right.
Do coins ever go to zero? Rarely. They rarely ever go to zero. There's always going to be somebody mining it. But this is the protocol war. So we've had a similar protocol war with the early days of the internet with over TCP/IP and X25 and these other protocols that these large institutions were trying to compete with. And we saw the open source win out every time because it was better. There were more smarter people working on it. It was being updated more. It was evolving quicker, and that's what we're going to see with these other projects as well. And again, it's only going to drive the price higher. It's not going to affect the price lower because this fear that you're trying to instantiate that we have to fear that KYC, if it's not KYC'd, it's not going to get market adoption. That is the thinking of the current market. That is the thinking of how things currently work, right? But if you look 5-10 years down the road, that is not how things are going to work. We're going to live in a world with crypto, with private crypto, with truly private money, with truly free trade. And in that world, we can build so much more, so much bigger society, so much almost like a golden age, so much more better things for society than what we're building with this fiat ideas. These fiat ways, these central banking ways, these older methodologies are just going to crumble. And so they will not be able to compete with what's coming out.
And it reminds me then of that quote, I think you shared it out from Simon Dixon, where he was saying the cold, hard reality is that Bitcoin is either worth zero or it's sound money. And if it's sound money, it's worth a hell of a lot more than it is today. It's kind of interesting. Okay, so what other interesting developments are there? What the most important developments you think are happening in Bitcoin?
Yeah, so another one is something on the development side called Schnorr signatures. And this is really, 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 really cool because this allows us to achieve a couple things. This allows us to achieve further scalability, but also further privacy. This allows us to really scale out multi-sig transactions. It allows us to create more complex multi-sig transactions, more complex smart contracts on Bitcoin, and in a very, very private, scalable way. So we can now, for example, combine like thousands and thousands of transactions into one single signature with something like Schnorr, and it will be private, and that increases privacy as well, because now you can't tell, where the addresses are sending to, because it's all part of this one single signature. And so it ends up both being good for scaling and good for privacy. And so I think Gregory Maxwell is the one that's currently working on that right now. And that is going to be just a huge development for Bitcoin. That's going to allow a next evolution of smart contracts, a next evolution of scalability of privacy, a next evolution of further programming on Bitcoin, because right now people think that Bitcoin is limited, and it is limited in a sense, but it's limited on purpose. And the amount of things that you can do with Bitcoin is actually pretty extensive if you really understand the cryptographic primitives and put them in and combine them in such a way. That's the key is the combination of them and what you can do. And now with Schnorr, that's another building block that we can use to build even more powerful and important things.
Wow, the level of complexity of what is being created seems insane. The way I can explain how complicated this is, I went on to Peter Todd's blog, and I didn't even understand what the articles were about, let alone understanding the topic.
Absolutely. It really is a whole nother rabbit hole. And, it's kind of like this in anything, right? If you try to talk to somebody who runs a nuclear power plant, you go to these guys, you don't want the whole world like weighing in on how these people are running a nuclear power plant. You want intelligent people that are suited for the job, people that have done this their whole life, people that have studied this technology. You want those guys running the nuclear power plant, right? You don't want just anybody. And that's just really important, that people think that, that we put core developers on, on pedestals or things like that. It's like, no, we just respect that they are experts in their field. This is what they've done their entire life. This is what they're passionate about. This is what they're going to do until the day they die. And so if we're going to trust anybody with this nuclear power plant that is Bitcoin, we got to trust the people that are passionate about it, the people that are working on it, and these type of people, the people that are make sure that when you go to sleep at night, the nuclear power plant is not going to explode.
That's a really, really good way of putting it. Okay, and then on the finance side, obviously there's lots of chatter about ETFs. I wish it wasn't hadn't become such a hopium thing. I liked the idea of ETFs expanding Bitcoin out into wider communities, but I also watched Andreas's video today where he's against it, and again that all makes sense. And we've also got ICE launching Bakkt, so I'd love to hear your views on both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a bunch of financialization that's happening with Bitcoin. What's happening is Wall Street is waking up, right? The older institutions, they're figuring out that this thing is not going away. They're figuring out the opportunity that they can have from playing with Bitcoin instead of playing against Bitcoin. And that is, again, a testament to the game theory of Bitcoin that incentivizes you to be a good actor within the system instead of against it. Because if you go against it, the economics will crush you, as many altcoins and many businesses have seen. As Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, likes to say, Bitcoin broke my heart. And what that really means is that he could not have control over it. He tried his very best to actually have control over it, and Bitcoin said no. He tried to make Bitcoin the way he wanted it, and Bitcoin said no. Bitcoin refused. And so, it's really sort of hard to understand, but that's what Bitcoin is. It really is this unstoppable force. And so these people on Wall Street, they're understanding this. They're trying to build tools around it. Now, an ETF. We've already built a bunch of things like, right, we have the options market, we have futures market now on Wall Street. So we have different people doing these things with the CBOE and the CME. But now we need more advanced tools, right? We need more trading desks. We need more ETFs. We need the ability for 401ks and regular people to be able to, and high net worth individuals to be able to invest into Bitcoin. And so this is what these things are doing now. It's an important thing to keep in mind that this new Bakkt startup is fiscally delivered Bitcoin. That is huge. What that does is that prevents people from creating fractional reserves. That prevents people from gaming the market too much. Because if you have something like just cash settled, that does end up being manipulated a little bit easier. But when you're talking about physically settled the Bitcoin, boy, you better be there because that is you better have the Bitcoin. And so this is what this does is this creates a more safe market for investors. This creates a safer base for people to be able to build applications on top of it. This is something like a Starbucks or a big company. A Starbucks can go and say, "Hey, oh man, this is a real liquid market. There are real people investing in this. The security is there. I guess we can start, maybe partnering with you to be able to integrate this into our payment systems and things like that." And so this is just another stepping stone for Bitcoin, another step in Bitcoin taking over the world. It was inevitable. Of course, it was going to take over Wall Street. This was the plan, guys. This was the plan to bring Wall Street, to bring Bitcoin to the world, to bring Bitcoin to Wall Street. And they can try as they might to manipulate. They have their tricks. They have their games. We know this, guys. We know they have high frequency trading. We know they have manipulations. We know they have people with large amounts of money. But the thing is that you can only manipulate it so far because Bitcoin is decentralized. It is global. There is hundreds of exchanges. The liquidity is everywhere, and you can't actually manipulate it too much. So in my opinion, because there's people like Tone Vays that thinks people can just manipulate Bitcoin to the ground, and in my opinion, it's just not possible. There's too much people in the system at this point. The ecosystem is too large. There's too many hodlers of last resort. There's so much liquidity. There's so much. Right now, Bitcoin is actually transacting more than gold on a day-to-day basis. Bitcoin is now transacting more than gold. So there's, at this point, you just can't manipulate it too much. Of course, it's still an illiquid market compared to something like gold, right? It's still really small, but at the same time, boy, it is resilient. It is strong. It is robust, and it has been tested 24/7 every single day for the past 10 years, and still we are here. Still, it is here, following its curve. That it's a supply curve that from the very beginning, from the bottom to the top. This nice, beautiful arc. The price is still following that. Sure, it goes up and down it a little bit, but it still follows it all the way from beginning to end. It's actual supply curve from zero, from all the Bitcoin that it does, per day, to zero Bitcoin ever be able to be reproduced again in the year 2140. It's continuing to follow that curve, and I don't see it swaying from that curve anytime soon, despite it eventually taking over Wall Street.
But Caitlin Long would disagree with you on creating fractional Bitcoins, and I completely disagreed with her when I originally saw it. But actually, then I started reading into. I read her blog post on it. I'm not sure if you've read about this. The two topics. Commingling, I've never heard them. I might even pronounce them wrong. Commingling and rehypothecation. So the two subjects she talks about, and the way Wall Street works, and if Bitcoin wants to become part of Wall Street, it'll have to be part of it. So there is, in theory, the ability for, but this appears to be not a problem with Bitcoin. This to be a problem with the way Wall Street works, in that they will be selling paper contracts essentially to Bitcoin that maybe they don't even have.
Like I said, remember the Bakkt is physically settled, so that's not just paper.
But I think there is a time delay on it. So the two things she talks about is that, so the commingling thing is that the custodian will hold the client collateral, so it's the Bitcoin, rather than having them as segregated wallets. But she said today's obligations can be settled with collateral received yesterday. So it reduces the possibility of a shortfall. But there's different types of collateral can substitute for each other. And then when she talks about rehypothecation, she talks about, she says in simple terms, results in multiple parties reported in their financial statements and can own the same asset. So she has essentially outlined, I don't fully understand it, but she has outlined a risk there, and she was saying that Bitcoin needs to change for Wall Street, which I obviously think is terrible, and I think you obviously think is terrible. So I don't know if you've looked into that, but I found it all it went over my head quite a bit.
Yeah, so I've seen the article, and I skimmed through it, and I think you really did hit the nail on the head again, Peter, when you said that she thinks that that Bitcoin needs to change for Wall Street. So let's be very, very clear here. Wall Street wants to be a part of Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Bitcoin doesn't need to be a part of Wall Street. So I'll say it one more time. Wall Street wants to be a part of Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't need to be a part of Wall Street. Bitcoin is economics asserting itself. You cannot stop this economic force that is a limited supply that will absolutely suck in all other value on the planet like a black hole. So what you can do is you can put up articles like this and say that, Bitcoin needs to change in order to play with us. And what it is, of course, it's a power play. They're trying to say that Bitcoin can't play with us unless it changes. Now, of course, there's all sorts of interesting science behind this. And, of course, they're going to use all sorts of large financialization terms. They're going to use all sorts of big, economic terms from Wall Street. That's going to confuse people into thinking that maybe this is true. But at the end of the day, they've been doing this for years, right? They've been trying to tell us that for years it's going to die in the halving. It's going to die from the futures. It's going to die from the options. Now it's going to die from the ETFs. In fact, Bitcoin just keeps coming, and that's because you can't stop it. Again, there's enough people in the system right now that want to see it succeed that it will succeed. Now it's just a matter of time. Now it's just a matter of when, not if. So, in my personal opinion, with all of this said, that Wall Street will change. They will alter. They will modify regulations and software in order to be able to accept Bitcoin, because the demand will be so great that they will not be able to turn it away. They will not be able to have their way. They will not be able to use as much of their tricks, and they will not be able to hide behind regulation. The demand will just be too great. People will want to hold this asset, and if they don't allow them to hold this asset, they will find a way to hold this asset somewhere else.
And a fork would expose any fractional lending anyway, so I don't think we have to worry too much about that.
Absolutely.
Listen, we've done like an hour and 10 now. I could probably talk to you for hours. I think we're just going to have to do this again sometime. So look, before we close out, I think you should just remind people of the projects you're working on, where they can find out about them, and who you want to hear from, and where they can find you yourself.
Yeah, Peter, it's been great, man. We really, really could talk for hours, man. You are a very knowledgeable person. You bring on very knowledgeable people. And so, again, I just wanted to say I really, really enjoy your content. Yeah, everybody needs to check out all of your episodes. You've been going for a while now. And so I think there's a whole lot of educational content that's really valuable there for people. And, I myself, too, try to educate people. I do have a YouTube channel out there that people can find all my content for free. That is the CryptoCast Network. You can just search for that CryptoCast Network on YouTube or Google. And of course, you'll find it. And we just try to educate people about Bitcoin, like yourself, trying to bring on guests, investors, developers, people that are actually working in the system itself, within the space. Not so much just talking heads, not so much just people with ideals. We try to bring people that are actually trying to affect change and build things on the show. And so we really, really are proud of that, and we hope that people learn something from that. So people, again, can check that out at CryptoCast Network. And then, of course, the workshop. We are me and the creator of the NBitcoin C# Library, Nicolas Doyer. We are traveling the world right now, the west coast of the United States, trying to teach more application developers about Bitcoin, trying to raise awareness about Bitcoin to developers so that we can really get them interested in this and in this space, and try to create a whole new wave of people working with Bitcoin. Because again, it's so early. People don't know that this library is available for free right now, and we can teach you how to use it. And we're also going to be making all of the information, tutorials and stuff like that for free available on the website itself as well, because we're going to create a website called BitcoinC#.org, where we're going to curate all of the articles that you would ever need to be able to learn it yourself. We're going to include all the material that the workshop was based off of and everything, so that if you are a programmer and you're a pretty smart guy, you don't need to actually use our workshop. You can just check out all the material for yourself. So that's about it for me. I really appreciate you having me on, Peter, and I hope that your audience can find us in more Bitcoin content. This is really the future and the revolution that gets me up every day.
And thank you for coming on. I'll share out all those links in the show notes and out on Twitter so people can find them, and continue your good work. And I'm really glad we did this, but I think we're probably going to have to do this again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter, for having me on.
Okay, take care, man. Okay, what did you make of that? Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy everything Vortex had to say? I am sorry for the bit we lost in the middle, the bit on the Corey Fields' approach to how he handled the vulnerability he found in Bitcoin Cash, because it was really interesting. But like I said, I will share some of that out in the show notes. And also, we lost a bit about the Bitmain IPO. Again, that was super interesting. Again, I'll put something about that in the show notes. But I thought it was a really great chat. I only got through about half my questions with Vortex as well, so hopefully I will get to speak to him again in the future. All his projects I'm going to share out in the show notes, so please do check them out. And please do support the show. Please do leave me a review on iTunes. They always help. Please do check out my website, which is www.whatbitcoindid.com. Please do follow me on social media, and do feel free to email me. My email is hello@whatbitcoindid.com, and I pretty much reply to anyone. I have a couple of great interviews coming up, which I'm looking forward to sharing with you over the next few weeks. I've got some great people while I'm out here in California, and I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you soon.